anyone ever honored one of those if we're still single at 40, let's get married commitments? How did it go? Story 1, I did that. I met her in high school. We grew apart over the years. We reconnected and said, let's get married if we're both single when we're 40. Then we said it, let's go to Vegas and get married by Elvis. Our first kiss was Thanksgiving Day, and we were married on December 17th. We're still going strong after 7 years. Longest relationship I've been in, best decision of my life. Story 2, weird couple my wife knew had such a pact and followed through. Girl was a really introverted, quiet, homely type, sweetest girl, but she never had a boyfriend as far as I knew, and we saw her off and on for 6 or 7 years. Then suddenly out of nowhere she invited us to her wedding. Anyways, it was to a guy we had met a couple of times. It was one of her friends who seemed very much like her. My wife teased her that more must have been going on all that time, but she was straight up about it and said no, they just decided it was time. Conversation was something like, yeah, you know how people have pacts to get married if neither of them are till they hit? Well, we just decided it really wasn't going to happen for either of us. And to cut that short, basically we were just like, cool, and then left it at that. Anyways, she married him. They looked happy. The speeches were a bit odd. They didn't really talk about love, but a lot about how they were marrying their best friend. They're still together. It's got to be at least 5 years. And they have a little kid. Last we saw them, they looked happy. And that's all that matters, really. Story 3, friends since we were 14 in high school. Made a pact in our early 20s about if we were 30, childless, unhappy, etc. Got married at 30. 7 years later, it's still the best relationship we've ever had and going strong. Story 4, I know a couple in my church who were friends first, like best friends, and when they got in their 30s, they still weren't engaged or married to anyone, so they decided to get married. They're still together and very much in love. Story 5, I made the pact with my best friend when we were 15 that if we were single by 30, we'd get married. We're 29 and still talk to each other daily. We're also both single. She also remembers the pact. Sweats edit 1, let me see what she thinks about that pact. We'll let you know. Edit 2, we're talking. Edit 3, part 1, part 2. Holy. Edit 4, OMG, thanks for the plat. Story 6, I've got a roller coaster of a story. So when I was a kid, we got a new neighbor. He was great, had a cute dog, seemed to have his life together, but was chronically single despite his best efforts. Few months later, we hear he got married, much to everyone's surprise because he clearly hadn't been seeing anyone prior. Turns out he had made a pact to marry his best female friend when they both turned 30, if they weren't in a relationship, and they followed through. She was the world's sweetest person and really pretty to boot. Frankly, everyone was surprised that either of them felt this was necessary to begin with. She had moved across the country to be with him, so she didn't have any family nearby, and that's probably partly how we all became so close. Anyhow, they were actually crazy happy together, got another dog, etc. The only thing that seemed off was that despite several years of him and her talking about desperately wanting kids, she was pretty well always interacting with me. They were still childless, which everyone assumed was owing to a medical issue. Then we learned that, while an absolutely fantastic and loving husband when sober, he made for a mean drunk. This culminated in her snapping and pulling a knife on him and leaving. They were separated for a few years, during which time neither wanted to explore divorce other relationships because they still loved each other, and her leaving was definitely the boot he needed to get his rear in gear. He spent those years with Al-Anon, became incredibly involved in his church and community, and spent a lot of effort winning her back, convincing her head changed. They're now together and seemingly happy as ever. We only know all of this because he was super open about his problems with his community doing some advocacy stuff. He had one brief fall off the wagon, but checked into rehab or something like it almost immediately, and has since been doing well. They've both decided not to have kids because they're not sure he could handle the stress and the temptation to start drinking again. They've recently moved to an acreage in a very remote area, so we don't hear from them as often, but last I heard they were doing really well. Edit, and not Al-Anon TIL, there's a difference. Edit, holy cow. My first gold. Thank you, whoever you are. Story 7, had one to get married at 30. I got married before that, and I don't think my friend took it well. We had sort of a strained relationship after, and now we don't really talk much. Used to be best friends. Story 8, had one for 30 and moving in together. She was 7 years my senior, and around that time we were both in a transient part of our lives. So I asked, she said no, and moved across the country. Story 9, it wasn't for marriage, but in high school, I had a deal with my wife that if she was single at the time, she'd go to prom with me. We ended up dating a few months after that, and I've been together for 12 years now. Story 10, I dated my first girlfriend when we were about 17 and 19. Then she broke up with me, but we had said such a thing before while we were still dating. We both had a few boy girlfriends over the years, but about 15 years later we met again and essentially said I really didn't find anyone with whom I felt like I did with you. But it wasn't with resignation, more of an epiphany. So we started dating again and married soon after, and couldn't be happier. Story 11, I had this one friend I would hook up with on and off for years. And we had this pact, if she hit 30, we would marry. I would be 35. I always avoided actually dating her because she cheated on every boyfriend she was ever with and was a bit of a nomad. I told her I didn't want to ruin the friendship. When I got engaged to my wife, my FWB was livid. She figured she can have all the fun and would get married at some point. I never spoke to her again after my engagement. She got married last year. I congratulated her, but got no response. Story 12, my friend tried this as a proposal on his longtime friend, and it worked so beautifully that I want to try that out once. This is what basically happened. He asked the girl if she would like to be in a relationship with him if both of them were single after a certain age. The girl replied that it would be better than being single. So yeah. Then she asked at what age should we start dating each other. And then with a few seconds of the pretending to think expression, the boy said, well, how about 17 their age at that time? Edit usewarby8d asked if this was a copy-paste. Yes, this was copy-paste to my very first comment on Reddit. I use it many times, even in gatherings when someone tells me to say something, anything LOL, my friend gave me conversation material. Story 13, I had several pacts like this over the years. Within a year, they were all in serious relationships. I was like the wedding bargain matchmaker. All good though, been with a great woman for almost 4 years now, and we were good friends for 7 years before that. Story 14, I had one of these with my best female friend from high school, but it was 30, not 40. Meanwhile, I've gotten married twice before 30, and she would have been my best woman at both weddings, but she was in OCS the first time, deployed the second time. Doesn't seem meant to be, does it? All that said, if something weird happened and I was single and she remembered the Pact ID, absolutely hold up my side. Story 15, we didn't do this exactly, but when we were 19, we joked that we should get married if we're both 35 and single. 2 years later, I came home for a week from college. We hung out in our normal friend group, and she and I hooked up for the first time. We ended up starting a relationship, got married when we were 27, and are still together at 30. Not a result of the Pact, obviously, but funny that we ended up married anyways. Story 16, I didn't know this was actually a thing for other people. I had one of these though. Hey, race my story. My family has a summer place on a lake in another state where I have gone every summer since I was a baby. Other families did the same so. I grew up with these other families' kids. There's like 10 kids in our group, and we spent almost every waking hour hanging out together. One of the girls in the group was about a year older and kind of shy and chubby. Not that it mattered though, we were just really good friends. Fast forward to our early 30s years. She had moved away from her small town, much to the amazement of her family. It was the kind of small town that you were born in and would probably die in. Nobody ever left, but she did. She had a great job where she was able to make and save a ton of money. She had also lost weight and had become crazy beautiful. At the same time, most of our group of friends were getting married and working on having families. As a joke, one of our friends said, hey, if you two are still single when you hit 40, you have to marry each other. We had been drinking, so it was easy to get us to agree. Fast forward again. Before I hit 40, I met the love of my life and have two bad little ones. The girl from the lake had moved back to her little town and fell into the trap. She met a dude at a bar one night who got her pregnant and was never to be seen again. She was alone with her little one, and to be close to her family, she remained in the little town and had abandoned the path of a successful life that she had been on before. We still see each other every summer, and my wife hates it. She says it's so obvious that she still has a crush on you. It's weird how, when you look back, you can see those decisions that seem small at the time, but have a huge effect on life. I could have married her and she would have been in a better place now, but I would not be where I am now if I went down that road. Life is weird, man. Story 17, friend, and I made a pact in college that we would marry each other if we're both single by the time I'm 30. I'm turning 30 in a few years. We barely spoke for the last 7 years. He now has a girlfriend and lives in another country. I don't think it's going to happen. Story 18, my BFF guy friend got married at 28. She is lovely, and they're so happy. I'm actually wearing the Wonder Woman shirt they gave me for the wedding photos right now. I was a groomswoman through our 20s. We kept putting the date later 30, then 35, then 40, etc. I tell you, though, if she passes away in some freak accident and he decided to revert to the plan, you bet I'd be all in. I don't have romantic feelings for him, but I know he's a kinky guy, so I could figure myself out for that, LOL. Story 19, I had one with a friend a while back, but at age 27, she was murdered 2 years ago. I turned 27 in January. Still hurts me heart, but I have an incredible woman now, but my memory of her is so great. Story 20, I had one with my best friend in high school. We're both gay lesbian and a gay man and new wed, want to adopt kids. Flash forward 4 years, and I go to visit him. His roommate is gorgeous, funny, and incredibly kind. Turns out she was also moving across the country in a month, but we couldn't stop talking and ended up together. Long story short, I didn't end up marrying him, but I'm going to marry his former roommate. Story 21, not me, and doesn't really answer the question, but my current GF had one of these pacts with a guy she knew. It was a joke in their friend group, cause tell me. Neither had dated. I don't think neither took it seriously. Story 22, I have one. It makes me kind of sad. I'm married with 3 kids, and she's still single. She turns 40 this coming February. Edit to clarify for the slow, I am sad because I feel bad for her that she will still be single, and I pray she wasn't hoping I would be too, and not leaving my wife at all. Boggles the mind that I would have to say that. Story 23, my neighbor, and I made this pact walking home from the bus stop in 3rd or 4th grade. If we were still unmarried by 30, we'd get married to each other. I emphasize unmarried because we have both been in serious relationships for 4 years in our late 20s. But I wasn't giving him any other loopholes. He turned 29 in December 2018, and I turned 29 in January 2019. I dumped my long-term loser boyfriend. He proposed to his amazing and beautiful long-term girlfriend. Should not have put all my eggs in that basket. JK, there was only like 5 of me that thought it would really happen between my neighbor and me. It was just time to move on from my ex, and definitely time for my neighbor friend to put a ring on his GFS finger. Story 24, my friend Danny, and I made this pact when we were like 12. We went to camp together for a few summers, then his mom died, and they didn't come back after that, but we were pen pals for years, real OL fashion letters in the mail, and eventually email, until one day, ID say we were in our 20s, and he said I met someone, and his name is Scott, and now I'm married to a lady, so maybe that's why we got along so well as kids. Story 25 had one, and when I said it, I meant it. We've known each other since we were kids, kind of an on-off FWB, while I lost interest when it was clear she wasn't over her ex. And when we did hook up again, it just wasn't the same. It almost felt as if both of us were just settling, and it didn't work. A big step backward from the relationship we had, where the idea was kind of an old flame fling type of deal. Story 26, there's a pretty famous Reddit story about this. This is not my story, but I won't be sharing the username as to not have this guy get spammed for a tragic event. Probably too late for this not to get buried. But I have a story about this. We met in college, and we're instant best friends. I was 20, she was 18. We spent all our time together, and were briefly lovers, but we never formally dated because both of us were very much into being wild and free and enjoying our youth. We dated other people on and off, but we talked about it and agreed that a committed relationship between the two of us would be an all-or-nothing kind of thing. Since neither of us wanted to give up our hedonistic, promiscuous, irresponsible lifestyle, we made a point of not committing to a relationship. A few years went by that way, and we were very happy. Right up until her sisters died. It was a car accident. They were 16 and 18, and both were killed in the crash, dead on arrival at the hospital. My friend was utterly, completely devastated. It still hurts me to remember it. Even now, her father, though, was even more devastated, to the point where he was legitimately willing to let himself starve to death, rather than try to go on living. She moved home, out of state, to take care of him. She cut ties with everyone for a while, even me. I didn't see her again for 2 years. She was so different after that. Before the accident, she had always been the most joyful, exuberant, positive person I'd ever met. After she came back, she was quieter, sadder, maybe wiser. I wanted to be there for her more than I'd ever wanted anything in the world. Not being able to fix things for her, not being able to make it better, that hurt more than anything I could ever remember. I guess that's when I realized how in love with her I was. I told her that I loved her, that I wanted to be there with her, and she told me that she couldn't handle the idea of any kind of emotional connection for a while. Maybe a few years, she said. Maybe never. Maybe she'd never be able to open up emotionally again. She said she needed space from me, particularly from me. She said she needed to figure out what it meant to be alive in a world where her sisters were gone. She asked me to give her time, and I told her that I'd give her anything she wanted. She told me that she had never been happier than she was when we were together. I told her the same. I told her that I understood. And that's when we made our pact. I was 25 then, and she was 23. We agreed if she turned 30 and I turned 32, and if she had learned to heal, and if she hadn't fallen in love with someone else, and if I hadn't fallen in love with someone else, then we'd get married. So that's how we parted ways. She moved to Wyoming to be alone. I moved to Germany to get as far away from her as I could. We didn't keep in touch at first, but over the next few years, we built up a correspondence. We wrote letters because we both liked writing letters. We email now, and then sometimes we'd mail each other books that we thought the other would like. Years went on, and we became closer and closer. When I turned 30, I half-jokingly brought up our marriage pact. I told her that I hadn't ever fallen for anyone else. I didn't mention this, but I couldn't have fallen for anyone else. I always compared every other woman to her, and in my memory, she was perfect. She replied that she was still very serious about our agreement, and that she had never fallen in love with anyone else either. I asked her if she thought she had begun to heal, and she said she had, as much as a person could ever heal from something like that. A year later, she told me she'd like us to meet and spend some time together, to see if the spark was still there. She was living in California at that time, and I found a job there. ID always wanted to live in California anyway. I proposed to her 6 months later, and she smiled and told me no fair, that I had to wait another few months when she'd be turning 30. I thought it was silly, but at that point things were going so well that a few months didn't seem like they could matter at all. But I'm crying now, so I'll have to wrap this up quickly. She died. That's how the story ends. She was hit by a drunk driver and spent 2 days in the ICU before her body gave out. I went to her funeral. I spoke to her father, but I barely remember what we said. I've never spoken to him since. I don't have the willpower to make myself find out how he's doing. That will be 4 years ago this November. I'm in therapy and trying to learn how to have feelings again, other than blank, mindless, miserable rage. I often wonder if this is what it felt like for her. She made progress. She learned to feel again. That thought is what keeps me going. She did it. She'd want me to do it. That's it. That's the story. It's a shitty story, and I hate it. Edit this is very difficult for me, in that I didn't expect to go back and reread this. But all the replies dinging on my phone were too much to ignore. It's hard to explain what it's like to only have two emotional states, anger and nothing. Someone said this reminded them of a Nicholas Sparks story, and hey, erased the difference between life and a love story in a book. She'd have regained consciousness before she died. In a movie, she'd have opened her eyes and looked at me one last time. I wouldn't have had to see her all smashed up with tubes in her throat. I'd have had a chance to tell her how much I loved her instead of the last words I said to her being, "Don't forget to pick up Scout's flea medicine." I'd be noble and tragic now, instead of a miserable shell of a person just trying and failing to believe that anything could ever be worth anything ever again. I'm sorry, I'm so angry. I want to delete this post, but my therapist would tell me that this is progress. Somehow. Thank you all for your kind words. If I have any advice to give, it's to go hold the people you love while there's still time. I have to go take some medicine now. Please have a very nice night. Thank you again for being kind. Edit formatting. Story 27. I had this deal with my best friend from Tech School Air Force, but we were young and stupid and said 27 instead of 40. I got engaged about 6 months before my 27th birthday, but even if I hadn't, I don't think I would have honored it at such a young age. Now that I'm past it, turns out 27 feels too young to think. If it hasn't happened, yet it never will. Story 28. My now husband and I have been friends since we were about 15. I watched that episode of Friends where they make said pact, so my girlfriends and I went ahead and chose one of our guy friends to settle with if we made it to 40 unmarried. So I chose my very good friend at the time, who even had a serious girlfriend. I knew that even if we weren't in love, that we'd still have a great time together, and that he'd always treat me well. We started dating about 7 years later, and have been married for almost 2. Didn't need to wait until 40, but I'm happy we got started early, and happy we're actually in love. Story 29, I have to say, being nearly 42 myself, these pacts make no sense to me. In this day and age, 40 feels really early to be throwing in the towel. I feel like my life just gets better as I get older. I'm smarter, have some life experience, and I'm more financially secure. For me, now is the perfect time to properly start thinking about a long-term partner. Story 30, I made an agreement like this. We live in different states, and ID moved cities since we knew each other during my college days. He found my mom's number, and she passed his message on to me. I knew that's why he was calling. I was married and pregnant when I got the message and never called back. But I think of him all the time. Story 31, I'm getting close to 40 and have come to terms with being single to my last breath. Not for a lack of trying, but the last one took a lot out of me. And the idea of starting over with someone new is just terrifying. Ill date, but ultimately end up just adopting a bunch of dogs and living out my days with the undying love of those doggos. Story 32. I have a pact like this with my online best friend, but while I'm an introvert with social anxiety, she is a beautiful Latina with no trouble finding girls to date. So it probably won't happen. It's probably just a joke to her, but I would definitely do it. Story 33. Long story short. Married, 15 years with a daughter, and it's been everything I could have hoped for and more now. Granted, we dated in college and broke up over something stupid. Then for the next decade, we were never both single at the same time for long, and things didn't time out well when we were both unattached. We never explicitly said it'd be marriage if we were both single at 40, but that's because neither of us believed in the institution for long. And I guess it doesn't entirely count, because at 35, I just woke up one morning 5 years into an otherwise successful relationship and said, nope, This is bullshit and with the wrong person. And without even consulting my future wife, I broke it off with a present girlfriend called future wife and was like, look, I know what I want and it's you. So maybe my case doesn't qualify because we actually happen to be in love without admitting it. Story 34. I had a pact with a firecracker of a woman friend. We had actually slept together 3 times, 7 years apart, late teens, mid-late 20s, early 30s. Just sort of FWBs, one-offs, every so often. At some point, we made the single at 40. Let's get married pact. I got married at 39. She got married the following year. I got divorced 8 years later. Her marriage is still on. But I'm pretty sure it's no barn-burning avatar of awesomeness. So we both might have been better off sticking with the plan. If she ends up single, I'd definitely look her up. Story 35, my 8th grade English teacher, actually her and her husband were roommates, and said if they were both single by 35, they'd get married. Well, they got married, had 2 kids, and they're still together about 8 years and counting as far as I know. Story 36, I made a pact with my childhood best friend when we were young teens to get married if we were both still single at 30. Ended up getting together almost 4 years ago in our mid-20s, haha. We brought up the pact before and decided it still stands. Story 37, me and my GF of 3 years made a pact like that 4 years ago. We're now both 24. Guess neither of us will be single by 30 to marry each other. So I dodged her bullet. Story 38, we had a pact that we would meet at the top of the Eiffel Tower. My dang heart got involved, and I married her at 24, but I still took her to Paris when the time came. Story 39, friends, since we were 15. If neither of us are married when we're 28, we got engaged when he turned 28, 6 months before I did. We'd just gotten done with a nighttime geocache. It was like 3 a.m., and our friend was in the car with us. He was driving. I was in the backseat. Friend was sitting shotgun. He mentioned the agreement. I literally said, I mean, your birthday is tomorrow. Why not? So we bought rings and announced it to family and friends. It did not go well, neither the announcements nor the engagement itself. I moved out and broke off the engagement within 4 months. We were meant to be best friends. We were not meant to cohabitate. He didn't even seem to care when I sat him down to talk about it. Wouldn't even turn off Thor, lol. His parents were devastated. Mine were relieved. He and I went right back to being friends, as though nothing happened. Story 40. I had such a pact with my best guy friend growing up. It was for 30, and he was married by then. Bonus, we remained very close friends until he died this past year. Extra bonus, his wife became my best friend and has been for over 20 years. Story 41. I had such an agreement with an old high school friend of mine that if we hadn't married anyone by the age of 30, we'd marry each other. Well, we found ourselves single in our mid-late 20s and ended up hooking up and sleeping together a few times. It was really nice, but that was it. I think we knew we weren't right for each other after all, but we tested the waters a bit, physically, and had fun. We still joke about it from time to time. Story 42. I had this pact with my closest friend girl. We said we'd do it by 35. Met my wife at 32. One of my wife's cousins was a great guy, and we introduced him to my friend one night. They actually knew of each other, as both were in finance. They fell in love and married a few years later. We always joke that I fulfill my obligations, and we're all closer friends now. Story 43. I definitely had one of these. It was supposed to be when we were 30. I turned 30 in a few months. The problem is I forget who I made the pact with. She is probably in a relationship, now whoever she is. Story 44. I made this type of pact with another guy. We promised that if we were both single at 40, we would buy a house together and turn it into the ultimate bachelor pad bro castle. Maybe we would even get a civil union for the tax benefits, and then hook each other up with as many women as possible. He's married, and I'm in an extremely serious 3-year relationship, so the bro castle won't be built anytime soon. Story 45, mine was, if we're still single by 25, I know let's get married, and he died before we graduated high school. Cancer, I don't think this is that bad of an idea, and honestly I'm wondering if the age should be 30 and not 40. Story 46, actually she wanted a hate child. She hated me, but wanted desperately to breed with me. It didn't happen mostly because I lost track of her, and she didn't know where to find me. Years later, we ran into each other in San Francisco airport, all the way on the other side of the country, and she asked me if I would have given her a hate child if we had found each other back then. I said yes. We both cried. Story 47, not me, but my friends I work with, they knew each other in high school, were romantic but mostly friendly, and made this pact somewhat sarcastically. 20 years later in their 40s, their high school friend group had a large rendezvous here on the lake where we live, and long story short, she never went back home to where she came from. I think they have a very average relationship, though. They're not rainbows and butterflies, but are satisfied and working as a team. I guess that's exactly how realistic and pragmatic a deal like that is. Last resort type of thing. It's working, though, so good for them. Story 48, a high school friend suggested that I was honestly insulted. I'm not good enough for you unless you've tried the big wide world and struck out. Then you'll be interested. I'm conflict avoidant, so all I said was, hey, yeah, we'll see. He got married pretty young. I don't think I was all that happy for him. Story 49, made a pact with my best friend that we would get married at 30 if we were both single. He wanted to date me all through from junior high to college, but I never went for it because I didn't want to ruin our friendship if things didn't work out. Finally realized it was worth taking that chance and date him already. We ended up married at 27. We're 31 now and couldn't be happier. Story 50, 13 years old. Me, and the real reason why the gods made the moon, made this pact that if we were not married or with anyone when we were 40, then we would marry each other. We were together until we were 17, split up because I was angry and didn't understand life at all. The last time I saw her, she was 22, married and just had a child with someone. My girlfriend, who would later become my wife, didn't like her and hated that she still was around my family, my cousin was, and still is her best friend. Because she didn't like her or me around her, I stopped doing things with my family and didn't see her for another 17 years. Life happens and me and my wife split. Got amazing kids and grandkids, longer story, but I love them all so much out of it. But now I sit next to this amazing woman who, after all this time, still wants to be my forever person. Sorry, don't know if this counts, but I had to share. Story 51, I told a girlfriend we had a really great relationship in our 20s that if we both hit our 30s, we should go for it. My Jess, if you're still out there, DM me, girl, lol. Story 52, I had one with a very good friend, but it was by the age of 30, we had both been in pretty awful relationships with people, and after being dragged through the dirt, we made the pact. Within a few months of us making the pact, we both found someone and were married to the other people within a year. I am happily married to my wife and have been with her for 7 years now. And she has been happily married to her husband, who she has been with for 8. I think the pact made us more comfortable with ourselves and less worried about being with someone, which I think helped us find our significant others. Story 53, when I was 19 and he was 17, my best friend and I said, we'd do this if we were still single at 40. So we'd get married, move down south, and have a farm. Well, we sort of fast-tracked after a few failed relationships. He joined the military, I moved, and we got married at 21, 19, moved to Georgia about 4 years ago. Just celebrated our 6th anniversary 2 days ago. I keep telling him someday I'm getting chickens. He seems to think I'm asking. I seem to remember a deal. Story 54, fell in love in 94. I was 18. She was 15, told her we should get married when I come home. Went to war, time and distance compounded. Both got married a few times to others. Just made it back to her 100 days ago. Now we're 42 and 39 respectively, and I knew what I knew then. I love this girl like in the movies, and time stood still for that. Story 55, this girl I knew in high school. And I said if we were single at 40, we'd get married. Neither of us is 40 yet, and we're both married. She married some 2 years ago in May. Okay, it's me, I'm the... Story 56, my grandma. Sort of did. She got married to a guy who was pretty shitty. My biological grandpa cheated on her and left when my mom was 17 and uncle was 10-ish. I saw him maybe a handful of times until he passed away last year, even though he lived 20 minutes away. Real piece of work. My grandma was single for 20-some years after that. A sweetheart of hers from high school was married as well, but his wife passed away from cancer. They ran into each other and hit it back off. Got married 2 years later. He was an amazing guy, but his kids were pretty shitty, totally mooched off him and used him. But he fit right in with my family, and we were over there helping with projects and hanging out all the time. He was fascinating, had a milling machine in his basement, and an insane workshop. My brothers and I ate it up, and he ended up helping me get a job that changed my life. I think having his grandkids around showed him how his family should be treating him. Unfortunately, after being married for a few years, Dave got pretty severe cancer. Within a year and a half, he was gone. It's heartbreaking to see my grandma finally find someone and then have him pass away that quickly, especially someone as great as him. I still remember being in a hospital room and having his grandkids come in and stare at their phones and then ask when they could leave.